is the Folksy Friend, and on this channel I like to talk about stories, in particular folk tales, beliefs, and mythologies. On Tuesdays we talk about Tolkien, and today is Tuesday, so let's go. In the blessed realm of Valinor, the great evil Melkor has stirred up anger, pride, and rebellion among the people of the Noldor, the elves who live within the city of Tirion. This all came to a head when their high prince Feanor openly threatened his half-brother in the middle of the city in full sight of everybody. Feanor was banished for 12 years from the city, and Melkor realized that his deceptions had been revealed, so he fled. The Valar gathered in the Ring of Doom, their circle of thrones, near the two trees of Valinor, and now they have to decide how to proceed. At this point, Orome and Tulkas had gone out hunting for Melkor, hoping to find him, but they never did, because, unbeknownst to them, before they had even left their seats, Melkor had thrown off his physical form entirely and gone back into his form as a spirit, which all the Valar could do. They typically wore physical bodies as clothing, you could say, but they could be an unseen spirit. That's what Melkor did, and he turned south, going to the far south coast of Aman. South of the Bay of Aldemar, between the Pelori and Belager, there was a desolate, dark space known as Avathar. No light touched that part of Aman, and that is where the deepest, darkest shadows in the entire world were. And Melkor entered that land, and he was looking for a specific creature. As far as anyone knew in any histories, the creature named Ungoliant had come in from the darkness that surrounded the world, and Melkor had corrupted her, as he did with many, to his service. But in time, she renounced him, rejected him as her leader, and wanted to become her own mistress. She had this gnawing emptiness within her, this void that constantly desired and made her ravenous for light. So she had hidden in the south of Aman because she knew the Valar did not typically look south, and there she had crept closer to Valinor, wanting to be near the light that she desperately wanted, but also desperately hated. And in that mountainous region, she wove webs that were thick and dark with shadows and kept her hidden. Ungoliant took the form of a massive spider and wove her nest of webs into the mountainside. There she sucked up all light that she could find and spun it forth again in nets of strangling gloom, until no more light could come to her abode, and she was famished. When Melkor found her, he had thrown off his beautiful, fair, elf-like face and taken on his dark form again, the same form that he wore when he was Lord of Autumno and ruler of Middle-earth. When he joined her, her shadows were so dark that even if Manwë had looked in that direction, he wouldn't have been able to see them. So, in the dark of Ungoliant's lair, Melkor began to plot his revenge. And although she wanted to help him to take part in this, she was desperately afraid of the Valar and flat out refused to leave the safety of her webs. So, Melkor made her a promise. He told her that if she helped him and their plan succeeded, and afterwards she was still hungry, he would feed her what she desired openly with both hands. With this promise, she agreed. Ungoliant wove a cloak of darkness around them both. This was not just a shadow, it was a kind of darkness that acted as a void, so that if one was to look at it, it would seem that there was nothing there at all. It was a darkness that made you disappear. And with that around her, she began her slow climb to the top of the mountains, and from there wove a ladder of webs which she threw down to Melkor. He joined her at the summit of the mountain they were on, which was named Hiarmentir, the tallest mountain in that area of the Pelori, and from there they looked down upon Valinor. Right below them they could see the fields of Arome. Not too far off were the pastures and orchards of Yavanna, and in the distance was the city of Valimar. At the sight of that shining city, Melkor let out a laugh, and then took off running down the mountainside, with Ungoliant at his side. Together they entered the land of Valinor, hidden by their darkness. Now in Valinor itself, it was time for a festival. There were no set seasons or weather patterns really yet, but the Valar still wanted to enjoy all the things that were possible in this world, and they wanted to enjoy them in the same way that the elves, the children of Ilúvatar, would enjoy them, and this included growing and eating their own food. Therefore, Yavanna set times for flowering and the ripening of all things that grew in Valinor, and at each first gathering of fruits, Manwë made a high feast for the praising of Eru, when all the peoples of Valinor poured forth their joy in music and song upon Taniquetil. This time Manwë declared that the feast was going to be grander than it had ever been before. He was fully aware that Melkor's escape was going to bring some sort of evil or danger down the road. So he wanted to try to heal or at least mitigate the damage that Melkor had already done in Valinor. He summoned all the residents of Valinor to his home on Taniquetil and specifically told the Noldor to put aside the griefs that lay between their princes and forget utterly the lies of their enemy. The Vanyar arrived, who were always closest to Manwë and Varda, then the Noldor from Tirion, and finally the Maiar. They all gathered and joined and began to sing for the delight of Manwë and Varda. So the city of Tirion and the surrounding lands were empty and quiet. The only group that did not come were the Teleri. They were content to just stay in Alqualondë, outside of the light of the trees. They didn't care much about the festival, and the wants of the Valar didn't really concern them. Not to the point of disrespect or malice, they just didn't really care either way. But Manwë didn't quite get what he was hoping for, because although all the Noldor from Tirion came, out of Formenos, only Fëanor arrived. Finwë and the rest of the Noldor that were there had stayed behind. Finwë sent the message that while his son was banished from Tirion, Finwë himself would remain unkinged, and he would refuse to meet his people. Fëanor himself had only come because Manwë specifically demanded it, and when he showed up, he was in plain clothes, not the typical fancy arrayment that would have been expected. His choice of plain clothing was definitely an insult to the situation, and he had deliberately chosen to leave the Silmarils behind. When Fëanor arrived, Manwë summoned both him and his half-brother Fingolfin to his throne. There they stood before him. Fingolfin held forth his hand, saying, "As I promised, I do now. I release thee and remember no grievance." Then Fëanor took his hand in silence, but Fingolfin said, "Half-brother in blood, full brother in heart I will be. Thou shalt lead, and I will follow. May no new grief divide us." "I hear thee," said Fëanor. "So be it." It was in this moment that Melkor and Ungoliant crept across the fields of Valinor and arrived on the hill of the two trees. Melkor stabbed each tree deep to the core, causing their sap to spill out as if it were blood. And that's when Ungoliant went to work. She sucked up the sap from the ground, then went to each tree, and set her black beak to the wounds till they were drained, and the poison of death that was in her went into their tissues and withered them, root, branch, and leaf, and they died. And still she thirsted. Going to the wells of Varda, she drank them dry. But Ungoliant belched forth black vapors as she drank, and swelled to a shape so vast and hideous that Melkor was afraid. Darkness fell over Valinor. Darkness created from the absolute absence of light and filled with a terrible madness and malice. It filled those who were still on the ground with terror, entering their eyes and hearts. Varda was the first to see the darkness fall across the land. She stood from atop Taniquetil and looked down upon their lands. Soon, their home was the only lit place within a sea of darkness. It looked as if the land below them had become completely drowned by darkness. The sounds of joy from the festival stopped, and there was utter silence throughout Valinor. Then, in the distance, they heard the screams of the Teleri. Manwë looked out, the only one to be able to see anything in that gloom, and he could see a patch of darkness that his eyes could not pierce, moving quickly through the north, across the Helcaraxe. And in that moment he knew that Melkor had come and gone. Tulkas and Orome set off immediately in pursuit. The striking of Nahar's hoof against the ground and the spark that it caused was the first light to show in Valinor after the death of the trees. But no matter how powerful they were and how swiftly they rode, the moment they encountered the utter darkness of Ungulion's vapors, they became blinded and disoriented. Orome tried to blow his horn, but the sound failed, and all Tulkas could do was thrash against the air. By the time the evil darkness had cleared, it was too late. Melkor had gone, his revenge complete. So I hope you'll join me next week when I go over the aftermath of this terrible thing that has befallen not only the Valar, but everyone within the Haven of Valinor. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I would very much appreciate it if you would let me know what you think in the comment section, and think about subscribing, and I'll see you next week.